Hello, all. Hope you're all doing good. I welcome you all to the third lecture of this course, EE 614. In the previous lecture, we discussed about the conductivity in metals, particularly the Drude theory. We showed that if you assume the electrons to be like the atoms in an ideal gas, you could actually derive the Ohm's law from first principles. It explained the conductivity of several metals. It also explained the Wiedeman's law, where the ratio of the thermal conductivity to electrical conductivity is a constant. While it had several positive features, there are shortcomings of this free electron model or the Drude's model. So we will just start with a brief introduction to that, and then we will go forth. So the shortcomings of Drude model is basically that it was not able to explain the temperature dependent conductivity, right? So basically as you cool down, temperature dependent conductivity, so as you cool down, the resistance of metals drop, but then they do not drop linearly. After some point they saturate. The Drude's model cannot predict this particular behavior. Second thing is, we saw the Hall effect, right? And the Drude's model always have negative Hall coefficient for all metals, right? But then experimentally, certain metals are shown to have positive Hall coefficients. So that is something which the Drude's model cannot predict. And the third one is always the issue of the velocity of the electrons as well as the scattering lengths, right? So the scattering length in Drude is about few angstroms. However, in experiments, even scattering lengths about millimeters have been demonstrated, even at low temperatures, right? So all these things are the shortcomings of the Drude's model. And the biggest problem in the Drude's consideration of electrons is that he considered electrons to be like classical balls, right? Such that they scatter off ions or they scatter off other electrons in the material and such. So the change that has to be brought inside in Drude's model is the wave picture of an electron. So that's what we are going to see today, is the wave picture of electrons. So we are going to start from the basic notion of the wave nature of particles that was given by de Broglie. So de Broglie suggested that for any particle of mass m and velocity v, you can associate a wave, right, such that its wavelength lambda is 2 pi h bar by p being mass into velocity, right, and h bar is the reduced Planck's constant. And we know the origin of Planck's, right? It comes from the quantization of the light. So he comes from E is equal to n h bar nu, and he used this for to account for the ultraviolet catastrophe and so forth. We are not going into that as of now. So we'll assume that we are in this state where Planck's constant is important. So the wavelength lambda is 2 pi h cross by p. So this equation can actually be derived from the Einstein's equation, right? So Einstein's relativity equation comes, the energy is given by mc square plus p naught c square, right? So if we assume the momentum to be very small, so we have our famous equation E is equal to mc square, where c is the velocity of light. But then for normal electrons, you can have m v square, and this being a wave, we have h nu, right, which is the standard Planck's formula. So now if you replace m v square is equal to h c by lambda, which will give you lambda is equal to h by the c is v, right, because v is the velocity that we are considering. So we will have h by mv, which is equal to 2 pi h bar by p. We get back the de Broglie's equation. Now you can also have p is equal to in this equation. So you have p is equal to h cross k, right? Because you have h cross by 2 pi h cross by lambda, and 2 pi by lambda is k, right? So the momentum of a particle which behaves like a wave is h cross k. K is 2 pi by lambda, and the wavelength is 2 pi h cross by p. So these are the simple derivations from the de Broglie's assumption. So after de Broglie's assumption, so there comes Erwin Schrödinger. He came in 1925-26, and he said that the general behavior of a particle which behaves like a wave can be described by a function what is called as a wave function. Wave function is psi, and it's a function of the space, that is x, y, and z, as well as the temporal component t, right? The meaning of this is the absolute value of value square is the probability to find the electron at r comma t. So what we mean by this is, let us say in I'm drawing this in 1D. So I have a function like this, okay. So let us say this is x naught, and this is x prime, this is psi prime, this is psi naught, this is x prime. So all we mean is that if psi naught is greater than psi phi, then the particle is more likely to be near x naught than x prime, right? So given this definition, he had a notion such that any measurable quantity, let us say we have position x, okay, the position of this particle, right? Any measurable quantity is an operator. Or I want to put it in another way. So any measurement is represented by an operator acting on the wave function. So what we mean is, let us say that I have the position operator. So I have x, the capped ones are operators, okay, x acting on psi of x, psi of x being the wave function here, will give us x psi of x. So basically this is an eigenvalue problem, and x being an operator and which acts on the wave function to give us the actual value x at that particular time, okay. So now with this background, let us take an example of a simple plane wave, okay. So let us say psi of x is equal to some constant e power I kx. So this is a wave function that we all know, right? So basically this is a propagating wave which goes to plus infinity and minus infinity in a sinusoidal form, right? And I define an operator. Now this is random till now, right? So I define an operator which is h bar by I dou by dou x, or in quantum mechanical form it is written as h bar by I delta. right? Now if this acts on the wave function that we have defined here, so this is basically a plane wave. So I have h bar by I delta acting on psi, which is actually p acting on psi, will give us h bar by I ik, again a e power ikx, right? So which is h bar k a e power ikx, which is h bar k psi of x, right? So this operator that we have defined actually gives out an eigenvalue h bar k of x. So basically I have p hat acting on psi of x will give me h bar k psi of x, right? So because this is the momentum of a plane wave that we saw from de Broglie's equations, this operator that we have defined as h bar by I into delta, right? So this is called as the momentum. So this is basically momentum, right? Because of the fact that it spits out h bar k, which is the momentum, right? So now we know that from classical physics, we know that kinetic energy is half mv square, right? Which is 1 by 2m p square, p being m into v, right? And p we just now defined, right? So if I have 1 by 2m h bar by I del square, which will give me minus h bar square del square by 2m, right? And let's say if there is some potential, right? This potential can be from a magnetic field, it can be a Coulombic potential, whatever be it, right? Maybe it is in a gravitational field such that the particle is at the top of a Mount Everest or something of that sort, right? Something which is spatially dependent, right? And this total energy is called as Hamiltonian, right? H is potential energy plus kinetic energy, right? And this is an operator because this p is an operator. So we have minus h bar square del square by 2m plus v, right? So this gives the total energy. So let us say that if this operator, right, acts on psi of x, it gives you some eigenvalue E, which should be the energy, because this H is the total energy. This is the operator which gives total energy, right? So this equation, which we put together from very basic, simple classical mechanics principles, is the basics of Schrodinger equation. Right. So now let's put the our trial solution. Before we had a e power ikx, right? Now let's put to this equation. Let's put it to this equation. What will we get? So we need to do minus h bar square del square by 2m plus v of r acting on psi of x. Now we make a big assumption. So we assume that this electron, this plane wave, is actually free, in the sense that there is no potential that acts on it. It is not acted upon by any Coulombic force. We do not assume that it is in a lattice. We don't assume there is some periodic, nothing, right? So we assume this potential is zero. So our h acting on psi of x now will be simply minus h bar square del square by 2m acting on a e power ikx, which will give us a h bar square k square by 2m into e power ikx, which is equal to h bar square k square by 2m psi of x. And from our previous definition, this should be the eigenvalue E, right? This is for a plane wave at zero external potential or a free plane wave electron, or so on, whatever it is. You can have, it can be a photon, electron, whatever be it, right? So this is the most common equation that you will encounter whenever we are talking. We will soon talk about the dispersion relation, the parabolic dispersion, and so forth. Of course, you have seen these things in your undergrad solid state physics. So this is the origin for having this parabolic or root E dependence with k, right? So I must remind you that we are still we have still used a simplified 1D form. In case it is not in 1D and a normal 3-dimensional space, then you can actually generalize this to be E equal to h bar square capital K square by 2m, where capital K square is kx square plus ky square plus kz square. Okay, and in addition to this spatial simplification that we did, we have also neglected the time dynamics, right? We thought it is stationary. Now our initial assumption was psi of x was a e power I kx, right? Now if I were to add some time dynamics, I add to that some another periodic in time fashion, right? So basically this is a traveling wave in both space and in time, k being the spatial frequency and omega being the temporal frequency. That we normally know, right? So our omega is basically nu by 2 pi, right? So now I'm going to define another operator, let us say, such that it is I by h bar dou by dou t. Now I have this operator act on psi of x will give me a I by h bar minus I omega, right? So this will be into e power, right? So basically this is omega by h bar into psi of x comma t. This is x comma t, right? Now we know that E is equal to h nu and nu is equal to omega by 2 pi. Therefore this is so whatever that we have here is again E psi of x comma t. Therefore this operator which gives another energy in the temporal domain, so E operator is I by h bar dou by dou t. From the temporal domain we got the E as an eigenvalue, which is h bar square k square, and E as an operator is I by h bar dou by dou t, right? So now let us replace this into our Schrodinger's equation. We will have minus h bar square by 2m plus v of r acting on psi of x is equal to E dagger or E operator psi of x. We know that both of them will give us E psi of x, r comma t, right? R comma t, or we can actually put both of them to be r comma t. So this is the complete Schrodinger equation. So we have started from the basic de Broglie's equation and then ended up with a very simple way to get the Schrodinger's equation, right? And we have taken the plane wave for our consideration here. However, we forgot to mention an important property, right? So that is basically it's trivial, but then it's very important. It's called the normalization. So everywhere you see I have this A here, there is a reason for that. That means that because psi is a wave function, it's a probability of finding the electron at some point in space. So let us say this is the space, minus x plus x. So the electron should be found at some point, at any instant, right? It should be somewhere. So basically, the way to mathematically express this particular condition is to have an integral over the volume psi of r comma t square dr should be equal to 1. So what it means is that at any point, at any time t, the electron is somewhere in the space, right? So let us once again take our example of a simplified 1D example of e power I kx, right? If I plug this equation into the normalization condition, I get minus infinity to plus infinity a e power I kx into a star e power minus I kx, right, which is equal to 1. So this has no real solution other than the trivial solution of a equal to 0, right? It's pretty straightforward. It can also be easily understood by the fact that this is a traveling wave, like it keeps on going like this all the way to infinity in both directions. So there is no way that you can actually normalize this particular waveform. So thinking about it, we have derived so many things based on this plane wave, but then this plane wave is simply not a solution for the Schrodinger equation because it is just not normalizable, right? So the solution to this is that whatever that we wrote before x comma t, we indicate it by a subscript. And the actual wave function we write as a summation over all the case, some let's say some coefficient psi k of x comma t, right? And this psi k, and if we assume that this k, so basically all these things are solutions to this Schrodinger's equation, right? And this k can be any number, and if this k are so smallly if this k is so numerous such that they are separated by a very small distance, you can represent this summation by an integral. So this is a sort of a Fourier transform of the real space wave function. So psi of k is actually minus infinity to plus infinity psi of x comma t e power minus I k the x So now we say that though this the actual wave function is a summation of many plane waves, and its frequency has a function. So basically, let us say that. So we say that this is psi of k, right? So its frequency response is actually a bounded response, such that if this is bounded, then we can be sure that the wave function is bounded, in the sense that it goes to 0 as k goes to infinity. So this thing can be well understood by a small example, right? Let's take a small example where I have this electron which is localized between, let us say, minus a to plus a. This is still in x, okay, and it has an amplitude of a. This is the wave function, and this is independent of time. So what we say is the probability of finding this particular electron within the region minus a to plus a is capital A. Right? some let's say it's bounded there, or there are some huge walls such that you put it here and then the electron keeps oscillating within this minus a to plus a, right? So now how do we find the actual wave function of this, or what are the how do you find the packet of this, right? So to do this, let us say how do we normalize this? What's the function of, what's the value of a? So it is actually psi of x, psi star of x between minus infinity to infinity should be equal to, this is normalization condition that we saw, right? So if I put this function here, I will have a square 2a equal to 1, which will give me a is equal to 1 by root 2a. Right? Now I can find its Fourier space components, which is minus infinity to infinity 1 by root 2a a, right, minus x, and this is valid only between minus a to a, so I will get minus 2y sine kx by minus k minus a to plus a. So this will finally give me 2 sine ka by root 2a k. Right. So basically this is the Fourier space for an electron which is bound between minus a to plus a, and with a probability of a, right? So hold on a second while I show you the plots for this. So basically this top one so this is the wave function that we saw, and its Fourier space seems like this. The blue one is actual wave function, and the yellow one is the value when or the orange one is the Fourier space component if a equal to 1, and the green is the Fourier space component if a equal to 5. So that means, so this is 1a, and let us say if this is 1 and this is 5. So the point of the entire exercise is that if the electron is localized to a small region, let's say a equal to 1, it has a much wider Fourier space. Let's say the orange one is corresponding to the a equal to 1, right? And the green one is for a equal to 5. If in the real space or in the normal space, if the electron is localized in a wider area, you'll have a much finer, narrower frequency response. And if you have the electron localized in a very small area in the real space, then you have a much wider frequency response, right? So you already have the notion of the Heisenberg uncertainty here, right? So what it means is for the electron to be localized in this large area is that its actual position in space is probabilistic, right? It is constant. So at any point in time, it is localized over this entire area. And when you have such an electron, now its k is basically the momentum, right? P is equal to h bar k. That's what we saw now. So its k value is more and more sharp. So the wider it gets in the real space, the sharper its momentum gets, and the sharper it is in the real space, wider is what its momentum is. So the uncertainty, in the sense that it just means it can pick any of these k values at any time, and it will have very different momentum values each time you sample when it has when it is localized to a very small area in the real space. Or if you want, if I put it in the other way around, if it have a very well defined momentum that is like a delta kind of, let's say if the K space is something like this, right, a very sharp one, right, around K prime or whatever it is, right, so it has a singular K value, then in the real space it is super wide, right, like A tending to infinity, minus infinity, and A tending to plus infinity here, right. So the electron can actually be at any point in the number line from minus infinity to plus infinity, right. So this is the origin of the Heisenberg uncertainty, and we have seen this from a very simple example of a localized electronics. I stop here, and then the next time we meet, let's go deeper into our solid state physics. Thank you.